question that's often asked is, where do you start with machine polishing? So this video gives you some basic tips and tricks for the beginner to hopefully give you some encouragement to have a go yourself. I made this video initially as the prep for the Garage Therapy ceramic coating, but this one concentrates more on polishing in real time to show my method. It's not a comprehensive guide by any means, but I hope it will go some way to help you in your journey into diminishing abrasives and a big black tool. And speaking of tools, this little gadget is a paint depth gauge or a coating gauge. It measures the thickness between the metal on the car body and the surface of the paint. Paint being made up of colour and clear coat, or lacquer as it used to be called. The basic principle of how they work is electronic induction, or the eddy current principle. When a magnetic field is applied to a conductive surface, eddy currents are generated within the metal. The strength of the eddy currents is proportionate to the thickness of the coating on the metal. Of course, that's all fine and good, but you're trying to polish only the surface of the paint, which is on top of the colour, and a rough guide for this is to check the thickness of the paint on the underside of a bonnet lid or inside a door. Try and find an area that looks less shiny, as it's the clear coat that makes the gloss, so if you measure the dull paint, it should give a rough indication as to how thick the clear coat is so you don't burn through it with your machine polisher. On this Skoda, we're seeing readings of under 80 microns, and on the main body of the car it's over 110 microns. To put that into perspective, a sheet of plain printer paper is approximately 110 microns, so we're not looking to remove very much paint at all if we're giving the car an enhancement polish. Any polish generates a residue you'll have to remove with a microfiber cloth, and choosing the correct grade is essential. A good quality general purpose cloth, as they're sometimes referred to, is what I'll be using from Valet Pro. I'm choosing this grade and pile as it's perfect for polish or even wax residue removal due to the short fibres. Plush or buffing cloths are the wrong choice for this type of task, as they're too fluffy. These Valet Pro ones are described as 300 GSM, which is the weight of the yarn, grams per square metre. Generally speaking, the higher the weight of the yarn, the better quality the towel, but it's the mix and the thickness you want to consider for removing polish and wax residue. The next tip is to put a few lines down the side of your backing plate. A dual action polisher has to spin as well as oscillate, and by adding 3 or 4 lines around your backing plate will show you when your plate isn't turning or it's stalled. That's supposed to be a feature to protect edges from burning through clear coat by the polisher, but it can get frustrating and makes you wonder why you wanted to take this up as a hobby in the first place. But don't worry, persistence pays off. Ideally, you'd use a small 3-inch polisher for this area, but it is possible to still use the 5-inch if you're mindful of any raised edges and don't apply any pressure to the polisher. Whether you dot the polish around is completely up to you, but it can be a little difficult to break the habit, but it can also give you an area to work to without using tape. You'll notice I've only taped off the raised rail and not around the panel gaps. That's okay, as it's a fine polish and a fine pad that I'm using, and I'm polishing the whole area anyway. If I was using a heavier cut pad and polish on the boot lid, but using a medium cut or a fine cut on the roof for any reason, then I'd tape it up. Did you see the pad stop on the paint there? That's another important tip to help prevent wear and tear on the motor. Different from a rotary where you would lift away a DA, you let the pad finish on the paint, and the speed throughout the set there was 4.5. That's the fabled Rupes sweet spot. I'm testing the temperature of the panel there. With it being plastic, it's a good routine to keep checking the panel isn't getting too warm, as you could also inflict burning into the clear coat, but that's mainly with very aggressive techniques and too much pressure. The next tip is keeping your pads clean. If you see the pad before I start the polishing set, I have 4 small pea-sized dots on the pad and it's a clean bright yellow. I'll keep the video in real time so you can see the arm speed, and the set configuration is the same overlapping passes. But as the pad gets to the edge, just look at what it's picked up. That's how much the pad has cleansed the paint of any oxidised layer, like a deep cleanser does to your skin. So after this set, you'd clean the pad before moving on to your next set. As I get near the end of my set on the right side, I blend in the whole area with a fast pass, but keep the polisher speed the same. I was originally taught to increase the speed to the maximum for this last stage of the process, but that increases pad temperature and can cause the polish to dust up as it gets overworked. As you can see, there's absolutely no rush to remove the residue either. It's one of the better tips of the trade to allow the panel to reduce temperature before removing the polish residue, as it's easier. Warmer panels can sometimes feel grabby or a little sticky. The sets continue as I progress around the car roof. I'm not having any issues at all starting the polisher on speed 4.5, and I'm not having any dusting issues. This is a very nice polish, so easy to work with. It's such a relaxing, easy process. A lovely day, and it's great to hear the birds singing away while I'm polishing. From here I start to increase the speed of the arm movement. That's just to refine the polishing set, something you only really need to do with a fine polishing compound or a one-step enhancement, as an aggressive cut compound will need finishing anyway and will only be a waste of your time. Now edges and door pillars, these should really be done with the 3-inch polisher if you've got one, as the 5-inch is just that little bit too big. As a general rule, you don't want the pad overlapping anything, as a dual action polisher can detect this and stall the pad. Again, that wastes time and effort, but the more you become experienced with the dual action and its limitations, you can start using the edge of the pad like you would with a rotary. And this is where you have to be very careful of the backing plate hitting something and damaging either the machine or bouncing off a part of the car and causing some damage. Here's another example of measuring out your set area. Roughly 3 times the width of your pad squared with a little overlap for luck is perfectly fine. Don't mask off an area measuring 2 foot by 2 foot, as that's only for people trying to show off a 50-50 to show how good the polish is. I was doing this for months before I realised that it wasn't needed. I'm not masking anything here, as the polish isn't slinging everywhere, it's controlled within the pad and applying very uniform across the set area. Whether you dab out the polish is something to play around with. I can't seem to break the habit of doing it. You can see the benefits of having the Sharpie lines down the backing plate now, as the pad is stalling, it's only oscillating and not turning, and that results in the pad scrubbing the paint. Sometimes it leaves marring behind, and that's usually caused by the pad not being completely level with the substrate, something you never suffer with a forced rotational DA or a rotary. Raised bonnet lines can be a right pain to polish. With a rotary there's a real danger of burning through the lines, as the pad is spinning faster and generating a lot more heat, but with the DA it stalls when you go near a raised edge to combat the threat of burning through. So how do you do it? Sometimes the only way to increase the torque with a dual action polisher is to increase the speed. More speed can sometimes overcome the stalling or just gently lift the polisher. I'm keeping it all the same speed here at first just to see if I need that extra speed, and keep an eye on the Sharpie lines again. If everything is spinning, you're winning. Keep doing what you're doing and have fun. So once you've completed your panel, you can check from all angles to see if you've not missed any areas or not buffed the residue. I've also taped off all the area below the bonnet as it's a different material there, and I don't want to polish the daytime running light lenses or the chromed plastic of the grille engine. So far it's all been about flat panels, so on to the vertical, and the principles are the same except it's on its side. Ideally, if you could lay the car on its side, it would be easier, but you can't, so you have to adapt. I'm using a fresh pad as you can't get round a whole car with just one pad. You'll need a few to change with. Heat from the polisher and constant cleaning wear out pads quick, so it's best to have a few to change with. As you can see, the pad isn't sitting square to the panel because the panel curves. In this instance, you move the polisher with the panel and keep an eye on the backing plate markers to help you. When it comes to 3-inch pad work, try and still keep the routine the same, i.e. not too big an area, and only really do 2 sets of left to right and 2 up and down if you have the space. I don't here, but you can still try to go left, right, up, down as much as you can to avoid holograms and buffer trails. I'm using microfiber pads here as they're soft and easier on the edges, but there's no particular preference in using wool, microfiber or foam pads, but foam pads are a little easier to clean between sets. I'm giving this little area another set because I'm chasing a tiny line where I think an airline has been dragged over the car to inflate a tyre. It might need a heavier cut polish as a fine cut is going to take a lot longer to sort out, but I'm being lazy here and seeing what I can achieve with another hit of the fine polish and the microfiber pad. So when it comes to polishing around the badges, you've got two choices. Completely cover them in tape or go gently around them, keeping the pad off the badge as it will wear away the chromed plastic surface. If in any doubt though, do tape them up as best you can and keep the polisher on a relatively low speed like around 2 or 3. You should also really tape around the edges of the plastic light lenses, as you see later when I polish the front bumper. Prevention is better than the cure with this one, and I'm taking the risk that the backing plate won't come into contact with the light lens and cause any damage. You can see I'm also keeping to one area, starting from the top down, just doing the tailgate with the lettering, and later on move down to the number plate area where I'll divide that up into 2 or 3 sections. Because I'm working vertically, I have to apply a little pressure to the machine, but it's no more than the weight of the machine that would normally be pressing down on the pad if it was a horizontal panel. Getting into the tricky areas can be a challenge, but there's always a solution. Grab a litre bottle of something that won't leak, wrap a cloth around it and insert it into the path of the tailgate to obstruct it, and voila, you have no need to tape edges or worry about hitting the bumper with the backing plate. This tip I can't take the credit for, and I picked it up while I was watching Jim White of White Details. As you can see, the original 3 times the pad size isn't so important with the smaller pads, but do keep an eye on the polish dusting, as remember that's a sign that it's been overworked. Cleaning pads between sets is a must to remove oxidised paint and polish residue, so I've been using this brush from Mother's, but to be honest they're exactly the same as denture brushes from the chemist. If you're wondering why I've not taped around the light, it's simply because the daytime running lights at the top are flush and the headlights have an edge around them, but if you feel that you would like to tape them up, then feel free. I should also have taped up that black plastic trim below where I'm working to avoid any polish residue being left on that plastic. It's quite a big area for a polish. If it was in poor condition, I would obviously tackle the area differently with a smaller work set and a heavier cut polish, but enhancements are practically a chemical brightener to the paint, so no need to worry. You'll see that yourself when you come to try it, and you'll be able to tell by yourself when you're overworking it, as I previously said. You can also apply some polish to your microfiber cloth to polish the chrome grille and anywhere else your polisher won't fit. Just don't rub excessively and you'll love the results. And of course, after you have polished, just to ensure you have removed all of the polishing residues and oils, it's always advised to go around the polished area with panel wipe. That's an isopropanol alcohol solution that will remove anything left behind and will help your wax, sealant or ceramic coating bond to the newly polished surfaces better and hopefully last longer too.